Hello and welcome to this video where we are going to talk about relationship expectations of a dismissive avoidant. Now, I always say on this channel that our expectations are essentially expectations. And what we really need to do is take our expectations, understand what they mean to us, convert them into needs, and communicate them to somebody. And this is actually what takes these unhealthy expectations where we're going to feel like people should mind read us, and we're going to feel frustrated when people don't meet them, and instead turn them into tangible things that can actually be used to improve the quality of relationships overall. So, for example, if somebody's a dismissive avoidant and they think, hey, my partner should always be understanding when I need space, but they don't communicate that they need space or communicate that they need understanding and compassion and why they need space, then instead it's just going to be an expectation that causes challenges. But if instead a dismissive avoidant can say to their partner things like, hey, I'm a little burnt out today. Can we, make our plan shorter because I need a little bit of space, or can we reschedule from tonight till tomorrow and I will show up and be super present tomorrow? Now they're taking those expectations of just assuming that the partner is going to have the best reaction ever when they need space, and they're converting it into understanding what they need, how they can communicate it in a healthy way, and also be mindful of their partner's experience in that whole mix. So what you're about to see in this video here is basically a clip from a webinar inside of PDS. And this is part of a series that we're doing on how to deeply connect with a dismissive avoidant. The webinar, you can check out the whole webinar down below. We do 4 webinars a week. I do them all with our students. So you can ask me questions, all that kind of stuff. And we do cool kind of like topic and content-based webinars. So if you want access to the whole webinar, you can check it out for free for 7 days down below. The webinar is all about all of the ways to deeply connect with a dismissive avoidant. But the key theme is that your job is not to change who you are to become this person. It's to learn someone else's roadmap based on their attachment style, see where you can make healthy compromises, but also ensure that you are also communicating your needs to your partner. So it's not just a one-way street, and making sure that the person shows up in response. And if they don't, it may be time to move into a different relationship, perhaps. So, really taking a look at that and understanding that is valuable. In today's version, we are going to talk all about, and this is just sort of a small clip from that full webinar. We're going to talk about some of the subconscious relationship expectations dismissive avoidants have. And if you want to see a follow-up series for how to deeply connect to the AP, to the FA, to the securely attached person, please let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to share because we're doing some upcoming webinars about that in PDS. I'd be happy to share little splices and clips from that on here. And any other topics you want to see in general, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And I really hope you enjoy this presentation. Dismissive avoidance as a general rule, and these are important things just to get out of the way. They tend to think that we are supposed to not rely on each other. And it's because that's what they were conditioned with, right? Usually they didn't really get a lot of room to rely on other people. And that actually is a really hurtful thing to live, right? When you're living thinking I can't rely on other people, it's kind of isolating. It's kind of lonely. A DA might be used to that, but it doesn't mean it's not isolating and lonely still. So, something that's important, and it will come over time, it won't be immediate, but is to have conversations where you say, I get it. You may not have historically had a lot of capacity to rely on each other, or to rely on other people, but a healthy, interdependent, secure relationship, we do that, right? We rely on each other. And so what ends up happening is, and to your point, Asme, sorry, I'm so used to the way I've known you for so long. So to your point, Asme, I'm trying to see where you went, but you said, but their love language is still support. Their love language, yes, that's not their love language. Their love language, we'll get to in a minute. One of them is acts of service, and they love to feel supported. But the funny thing is, their relationship to it, and I know this is really nuanced, but their relationship to it tends to be that they feel loved when somebody supports them, but they won't feel comfortable or safe asking for support. And there's actually a really big difference. When somebody pours into you and it just happens to hit home and it's nice, and especially DAs coming from this sort of survival space, they'll take it. But there isn't still this concept or idea where it's hey, a healthy relationship means we do this for each other, and that's the standard. So instead, they kind of will receive things and be oh, that's nice, but they sometimes won't give that back reciprocally, or think that this should be a healthy thing that's the norm in a relationship. They'll instead be oh, the other shoe's going to drop any minute, Or, oh, they're doing this nice thing, but I can't trust this going forward. I can't trust that this will be consistent. So even though they're receiving support and they like that and they appreciate it, they don't necessarily trust it. They don't think it's a standard. They don't think it's a norm. They don't think it'll be consistent. They have like a funny relationship to it at the same time. It's a really great question. But it also makes it kind of a confusing experience for the DA themselves and in their internal world. So like these conversations, ideally, when you're trying to deeply connect with the DA, just get addressed early on. Like, hey, like healthy, secure relationships, we do rely on each other. And like, we don't have to, and at the same time, here's another thing, dismissive avoidants always hear and read into relying on each other. They almost always do this as meaning, you now expect me to be perfect when you need to rely on me. And they'll be like, and I've had so many conversations with DAs and they'll say things like, I didn't want to do this thing because I didn't want them to expect it all the time. Like I remember the first Valentine's Day I ever had with my now husband, but he was just my partner I was dating at the time. And he did like a whole bunch of nice stuff for Valentine's Day. And then like later on in the date, he told me, he was like, hey, like I'm really glad you appreciate all this stuff, but I just want to like be clear that like, I don't want you to always expect this every year to this degree. And like, and it was like, no, you're going to expect so much from me all the time. And like, this is the DA, like that, like articulates the DA. And to the point where actually sometimes they won't do things so that the person won't expect things from them. Instead of doing something and then saying, hey, I might not be perfect sometimes, or, these sorts of dynamics. So, the more that we can say, hey, look, like the standard, the norm is that we rely on each other. We do nice things to each other. We give and receive from each other. Like that's the norm. And we're going to mess up sometimes. We're going to forget, but that's where we just solve that problem really easily and really quickly by just talking about it, by just reminding each other, like it's a solvable problem. Because instead DAs are like, but then it's a conflict and we don't know how to work through conflict and it can't be worked through. So then there's this unsolvable problem, right? That's like their viewpoint and kind of perspective of it. So it's like, so then I better just not do anything to begin with. And I'm avoiding future conflicts and problems by doing that. And what a good strategy. And so instead, like understanding and just realizing like, look, we can do nice things. We can rely on each other. We can support. Sometimes we're going to forget. We're going to make mistakes. And it's not even a big deal because then we'll just talk about it and resolve it. And then it's like, okay, all things become solvable problems. And now it actually feels good and empowering to want to have interdependent relationships. When we have a part of that missing, when we think we can't communicate through conflict, we're not allowed to make mistakes. We're going to get punished or shamed or criticized if we're imperfect. If we have like one of those pieces missing in seeing the whole picture of how a healthy relationship looks, then usually a DA will sabotage the whole thing instead, right from the get-go. That same sort of idea tends to apply to this idea of your partner emotionally relying on you. Again, like dismissive avoidants can sometimes think, oh, like they're not supposed to rely on me. They're supposed to be okay on their own, and I'm supposed to be okay on my own. And again, it's like, no, an interdependent relationship is both. It's not addition or subtraction. It's not and or. It's like, it's both. I have to know how to rely on myself as a human being. I have to be a whole person. So that if you're not there or you can't be there at some point in time, cool. I can self-soothe. I can work through that stuff in the relationship to myself. And at the same time, if we're going through a hard time and I need some support from you, I can come to you too, and you can be there and support me, right? You can hear me out. You can help me soothe if I'm having a hard day. You can give me a hug or rub my back or validate my feelings or whatever it is. But it's not one or the other. It's both, right? And so I think dismissive avoidants have this idea through an all or nothing lens. They think either we rely on ourselves or we are enmeshed with each other. Like we only rely on each other, and they don't see the middle ground a lot of the time. So again, it feels safer to avoid this like enmeshed, overpowering dynamic of we have to only be here for each other. And so because they don't realize the gray area, instead they go to, okay, I'm just going to maintain my space and my full independence. And that's how I'm going to solve that problem, rather than seeing, hey, we can both get good at self-soothing and we can both get good at showing up for each other. So definitely makes a big difference. And again, these conversations are best tackled through just having them, right? Just like clarifying these subconscious expectations that that this person is otherwise probably carrying, so that they're not participating in the relationship from kind of like an unhealthy idea of how a relationship can be. So I have some exciting news, which is that we are doing $1,000 off of our lifetime membership sale to the Personal Development School, which means you get access to literally everything at PDS for your entire rest of your life. Essentially, that entails all of our different courses you have lifetime access to. I do 4 live webinars a week, every single week. You can access them ongoing, and you get access to all of our daily community events. So I'd love to see you on the other side, and you can access it by using the link in the description box below. And then one of the last kind of expectations that can get in harm's way is dismissive avoidance may also have this subconscious idea that my partner should be perfect when I first meet them, when I'm dating them. We can't have any problems early on. We can't have any conflicts. We can't have many differences at all. And again, DAs come at that dating sort of experience through that lens, because if you don't trust yourself to work through differences or work through conflict, then you're constantly looking for the perfect partner and the person with no flaws and no pain points and no challenges. And sometimes dismissive avoidance will get into this like space in the early dating stage, even if they won't necessarily share this or admit this to their partner, where in the first little while of dating, they're like constantly flaw finding and trying to look for all the negative things, because it's their way of like self-protecting, like keeping that distance. And in keeping that distance, they're kind of like reinforcing to themselves that like, I'm safe on my own. I'm better off on my own. I can keep my subconscious comfort zone. I can keep doing things the way I'm used to. But it's really powerful to like be able to work through those things. And so one important thing to recognize as a DA, but also as any other attachment style, honestly, is that you're never going to find your perfect partner. You're never going to have a perfect match. Nobody's going to be like 100% lined up with you on 100% of things all day, every day. That's not how it works. How it works is that we're going to have somebody who's a really good match, a really solid match. We line up on a lot of things. We really get along. We really click. We have a great time together. We have similar, standards, and we're not hitting each other's non-negotiables. And when there's a problem, we're just really good at working through it. And that's the like healthy expectation that we want to have. Not that there aren't problems that we have to work through, right? Because then we get into like slightly, like, for lack of a better word, and I'm not saying this in a negative way at all, but like, I'll say a better word, actually, like fantasy thinking. I was going to say delusional thinking, but it sounds like so harsh and rude, and it's not like delusional, but it is like, it's not realistic. It's not like reality, right? Like we're not going to have the perfect situation all the time. So, being able to be aware of that and to realize the remedy for that is not to flaw find for more perfection and sabotage as soon as there's a small problem. The remedy for that is to get really good at working through things so that you become stronger through each potential problem, and it develops the dynamic more and more. So, those are some subconscious expectations DAs may carry.